Tonight, I want to take you inside the royal court of a kingdom long forgotten, where velvet curtains hid more than just the flicker of candlelight, and one locked door held a truth so dangerous it could have ended the crown itself. Imagine it, the grand hall stretching endlessly, gold leaf peeling from the ceiling, the air thick with incense and whispers. Courtiers in shimmering silks bow as the king passes, but every pair of eyes flicks nervously toward one weathered wooden door at the far end of the corridor. The servants tell stories of strange noises in the dead of night, of warm lights spilling through the cracks even when no one was inside. They speak of a smell, faint and sweet, drifting from behind the door, a scent that seemed to wrap itself around anyone who came too close, making them forget why they had come at all. No one was allowed near it, not the guards, not the queen, not even the king's most trusted advisors. And yet, one storm-soaked night, that door creaked open. Who opened it? Why did they do it? And what or who waited on the other side? This is the story of the Forbidden Chamber and the royal secret that should have been buried with the dead.
To understand the secret that door held, we must first understand the man who built the palace and the kingdom he ruled. His name was King Aldric of Edevorn, born in the winter of 1673, a time when the land was still fractured by wars and superstition. Aldric was not a child of peace. His father died on the battlefield when Aldric was just 12 years old, leaving a boy king to inherit a throne surrounded by enemies. By the time he was 20, he had fought in 3 campaigns, survived 2 assassination attempts, and was already known as the Iron Young King. Yet, for all his strength in battle, Aldric loved beauty, art, music, and the soft glow of candlelight in the great hall. He commissioned artisans from distant lands to fill his palace with wonders: tapestries from the east, marble from the south, and rare plants in bronze urns imported from far beyond the sea. But Aldric also had another love: secrets. In the west wing of the palace, away from the eyes of his court, he ordered the construction of a single chamber, a room with no windows, no record in the architectural plans, and guarded day and night by men who never spoke of what they saw. Some said it was a treasure vault. Others whispered it was a place for strange experiments, and a few believed it was not meant for anything human at all. To the people of Edevorn, King Aldric was more than a ruler. He was a living symbol of stability. In public, he appeared in magnificent parades, riding a black stallion draped in crimson and gold. His armor gleamed in the sunlight, and his smile was calm, reassuring, as if no shadow had ever touched his life. Children would run alongside his horse, and market stalls would halt their trade just to watch him pass. In the bustling marketplace, he would stop to speak kindly to merchants, taste fresh bread from bakers, and hand silver coins to barefoot children. His generosity became the talk of the realm: gold coins for the poor, grain for starving villages, music festivals and feasts paid for by the royal treasury. On feast days, the palace gates opened wide. The grand hall would be decorated with garlands of flowers, marble floors polished until they shone like mirrors. Nobles and foreign envoys would gather under towering chandeliers, while musicians played gentle harps and lutes. Aldric's throne room was a masterpiece of design. The throne itself, carved from dark oak, inlaid with gold, set upon a dais draped in crimson. From here he spoke words of peace to emissaries, welcomed travelers from distant lands, and blessed couples on their wedding day. Yet behind every celebration there were always eyes watching, some loyal, some envious, and some quietly afraid.
But not everything about King Aldric's reign was bathed in light. Beyond the open courtyards and sunlit halls lay the West Wing, a place the public never saw, and most of the court avoided after dark. The air there felt heavier, colder, as if the very stones had learned to keep secrets. Whispers spoke of strange happenings. At night, when the palace should have been silent, faint lights would flicker behind the cracks of a single locked door. Muffled voices, too low to make out, would carry through the corridor, though no one was ever seen entering or leaving. The servants knew the pattern well. During feasts and celebrations, there were rare moments when the king himself would vanish from the great hall. One moment he would be seated on the throne, raising his goblet, smiling for the guests. The next, his chair would be empty, the crown left gleaming under the candlelight. Hours later, he would reappear, pale, silent, his expression distant, as though his mind was still trapped somewhere far away. Those who dared to look closely swore they saw a thin layer of dust clinging to his boots, dust unlike anything found in the rest of the palace. Some claimed they had seen him carrying objects wrapped in black cloth. Others whispered about hearing metallic scraping from within the locked chamber, like chains dragging slowly across stone. And then there were the visitors, cloaked strangers arriving under the cover of moonlight. Their horses led quietly through the servants' gate. They would vanish into the West Wing and would not be seen again until the moonlight had vanished. In public, Aldric's image never wavered, the perfect king, the symbol of peace. But those who worked within the palace began to notice something unsettling as the more time he spent in that forbidden wing. It was as if a part. The whispers about the West Wing were not without reason. One rain-soaked evening, a storm swept across Edivorn. Thunder rattled the palace windows, and lightning cracked open the night sky, illuminating the sprawling courtyards in brief, ghostly flashes. The sound of rain on the roof was relentless, drumming like an army at the gates. That night, an unseen meeting took place behind the locked door of the West Wing. From the servants' corridor, a young maid carrying fresh candles slowed her steps. The faint murmur of voices reached her ears, low, deliberate, and unlike any she had heard before. She crept closer, her bare feet silent against the cold stone floor. Through the narrow crack beneath the door, she saw shadows moving across the floor. There were several, more than just the king's alone. They moved with a strange precision, like figures in a silent dance. What she did not know, could not know, was that these were no ordinary visitors. They came from the borderlands, territories long abandoned, spoken of only in hushed tones and fearful superstitions. The lands where the ground was said to bleed in spring, and the forests whispered your name when no one was there. The leader of the group stepped forward, his heavy black cloak glistening from the rain.
With a slow, deliberate motion, he removed his hood. His face bore deep burn marks in the shape of strange symbols, carved and healed over long ago. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, as though they had stared too long into darkness and learned to love it. Between them, on the long oak table, lay a sealed parchment. It was bound with black wax, stamped with an unfamiliar crest, a three-headed serpent whose eyes seemed almost to glint in the candlelight. The storm outside masked much of their speech, but the first to notice the change in King Aldric were the servants. In the early days after the arrival of the chest, his absences from the great hall grew longer. He would disappear into the west wing for hours, sometimes from sunset until long after midnight. When he returned, his eyes seemed unfocused, as if he were listening to something far away. Then came the physical changes. At first they were subtle, a paleness to his skin, a faint shadow beneath his eyes. But within weeks, his once vibrant voice had grown lower, slower, and colder. He spoke less at banquets, his smile appearing only when custom demanded it. Some nights, the guards outside the west wing claimed to hear chanting from deep within, slow, rhythmic words in a language none of them recognized. Once, a young guard swore he saw candlelight moving across the high windows far later than the king's usual hours. The rumor spread beyond the capital walls. In taverns, whispers turned to fear. The perfect king, the man of the people, was becoming a shadow of himself. But it was not only his demeanor that changed. The king began to make decisions no one could understand, ordering grain shipments to border villages that no longer existed, sending armed patrols to abandoned roads, and forbidding anyone, even his most trusted advisors, from entering the West Wing. At a council meeting, a noble confronted him, asking why the kingdom's resources were being sent to places without people. Aldric's reply was chilling, because they are not empty. He offered no further explanation. The more time he spent alone, the more those around him began to feel watched. Even in empty corridors, servants spoke of the sensation of eyes following them, of whispers brushing past their ears when no one was near. Then came the first public sign. At the midsummer festival, Aldric appeared before the crowd. His robes were darker than usual, lined with black thread in strange patterns. He stood silent for several moments, scanning the faces before him, as though searching for someone only he could see. When he finally spoke, his voice was deeper still, and the air seemed to grow colder with each word. That night, a storm rose without warning, tearing through the capital, and those who lived near the palace swore they saw a faint, unnatural light glowing from the west wing, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark.
It began with a sound. Just after midnight, the palace bells rang once, a deep, singular tone that was never meant to be heard outside of a king's death or an invasion. The corridors erupted with hurried footsteps as guards rushed toward the west wing. But by the time they reached the heavy wooden doors, they found them wide open. Inside, the air was thick, heavy, and unnaturally cold. Candles burned low, their flames bending as though pushed by an unseen wind. In the center of the chamber, the chest sat open. The black cloth was gone. King Aldric stood beside it, his hands resting on the edge.
His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a light the guards had never seen before, a cold, unnatural glow. He spoke softly, not to them, but to something in the shadows. The guards dared not move closer. A low hum filled the room, growing louder, vibrating through the stone floor. One of the men swore he saw the tapestry on the wall ripple, as if something behind it was moving. Then came the voice, deep, resonant, speaking a language none understood, yet every man in the room felt the meaning in his bones. It was a call, a summons, and Aldric answered without hesitation. He stepped into the shadows beneath the tapestry. The hum became a roar, the candle flames snuffed out, and for a moment there was only darkness. When the torches outside flickered back to life, the king was gone, the chest was gone, the chamber was empty. In the days that followed, the council announced that the king had died in his sleep. His chambers were sealed, his west wing locked forever. But the servants whispered otherwise. Some claimed they had seen a tall figure walking the palace grounds at night, moving between the trees, its eyes faintly glowing in the dark. Others swore that when stormy nights, the windows of the west wing still glowed with that same pulsing light, like the beating of a heart that refused to stop. And so the story of King Aldric became a caution, told in taverns and by firelight, that power always comes with a price, and some prices are paid not in gold, but in the soul.